Hello, my name's Mora, and my parents pushed me down the stairs during a family argument, all because I refused to hand over the $500,000 home I bought with my own money. It didn't start with violence. It started with guilt, with silence, with, "You know your sister needs it more." Then came the public shaming, the smear campaign, the staged fall at my front door, and the lawsuit claiming I caused emotional harm to a pregnant woman. They weren't just trying to take a house. They were trying to take my voice. But what kind of family does that to their own daughter? And what happens when she finally says no? I pulled into my parents' driveway with a strawberry tart boxed up beside me, still warm from the bakery. My mother had asked me to bring dessert. Her little favorite, she said on the phone, too cheerful, too rehearsed. Something about her voice had itched at the back of my neck all week, but I'd brushed it off. It was a family dinner after all. We did this maybe 3 times a year. No one went nuclear at roast beef and mashed potatoes, right? The house looked the same as always, like time had stopped somewhere around 1998. Same shutters, same chipped porch rail, but the number of cars outside was off. I recognized Aunt Rachel's Lexus, Uncle Jim's beat-up Ford, even my cousin Melissa's minivan. The whole clan had shown up like it was Thanksgiving, but it was just an ordinary Saturday in February. Inside, it was worse. Everyone was already gathered in the living room, dressed more formally than any of us had bothered for years. Skylar wore a pale pink maternity dress, her hands folded delicately over her belly like she was posing for a Hallmark card. Dorian, her boyfriend, stood stiff beside her, the human embodiment of "don't make eye contact." My mom swept across the room like a pageant host. "There she is! Mora, sweetie!" she beamed. "You're just in time." Her tone set off alarms in my chest. I handed over the tart and forced a smile. "Is this some kind of occasion I missed?" I asked, scanning the faces around me. They were too bright, too still, like waiting for a scene to begin. "Oh, nothing formal, just family," she said, and patted my shoulder a beat too long. "Go on and sit. Dinner's almost ready." I moved to the dining room. The good china was out, only used for holidays or strategic guilt plays. I didn't sit. My gut was already in a knot. Dinner began quietly enough. Plates passed, small talk floated around like helium. But the undertone was unmistakable. One by one, the conversation drifted to Skylar. "Poor thing," Aunt Rachel murmured. "Must be hard renting that little place with a baby on the way." Uncle Jim added, "Back in my day, family made room when things got tight." I said nothing. I didn't even lift my fork. Then my father, who hadn't looked up from his plate once, spoke. "Well, Mora's place is more than big enough. 2 bedrooms, no roommates, no kids, plenty of space." My jaw locked. Skylar shifted in her chair and looked down at her napkin. I stared at the roasted carrots on my plate. That was it. That was the approach. They weren't even being subtle. Mom stood up then, tapped her glass like it was a wedding toast. "Thank you all for coming," she announced, smile sharp and glinting. "I have wonderful news. Our Skylar is expecting." The table broke into applause and clucks of approval. Skylar beamed and placed a hand on her belly, but still didn't look at me. "And," Mom continued, "we've all been thinking about what family really means, about supporting one another in difficult times." I froze. "And Mora, darling," she said, turning toward me, "since you've been blessed with that beautiful apartment, debt-free no less, we think it would be a lovely gesture for you to gift it to Skylar and Dorian. I mean, surely you don't need all that space alone." The silence in my ears was louder than any shout. I blinked once, slowly. "I'm sorry. What?" "You heard me," Mom said brightly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Skylar needs a home and you have one. It's only fair." I looked around the table. No one met my eyes. My hands started to tremble, not with fear, rage. "I worked for that apartment. Every weekend, every late night, every skipped vacation, I earned it." Dad cleared his throat. "Don't be dramatic, Mora. It's just an apartment." "Just," I said. "It's my entire adult life in square footage." Skylar's lip trembled. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered, but she hadn't stopped it either. "Look," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I'm not giving my home away. That's final." The room fell into a heavy silence. Aunt Rachel muttered under her breath, "So cold." Uncle Jim sighed. "She's always been selfish." I pushed my chair back. "I think I should go." And then it happened. My mother picked up the water glass in front of her. With a flick of her wrist, she hurled it straight into my face. Cold, sudden, humiliating. Gasps echoed around the table, but no one stood up. No one came to my side. I stood there, water dripping from my hair, my sweater clinging to my chest, breath shallow and tight in my throat. "I cannot believe you just did that," I whispered. "Believe it," she snapped. "Maybe it'll cool down that attitude of yours." I turned slowly, grabbing my bag off the chair. Not one relative said a word. As I walked to the door, droplets trailing behind me, I looked back just once, at their dry, indifferent faces, and realized something sharp and ugly. I was never really part of this family. I was just a contingency plan. I didn't slam the door behind me. That would have given them a reaction to feed on. Instead, I walked calmly, my steps steady despite the water still clinging to my hair and collar. My mother's glass had soaked through my sweater, turning the fabric cold and clingy, but I refused to shiver in front of them. Not tonight. Upstairs, the hallway lights were dim, the old bulbs casting a yellow glow across the floorboards. I made my way toward the guest bathroom at the end of the hall, a space I'd used during every holiday visit, an uncomfortable overnight stay. As I closed the door behind me, I locked it, not just out of habit, but to draw a line they couldn't cross without force. I stood in front of the mirror and stared at my reflection, hair damp, mascara bleeding faintly beneath my eyes. I should have felt devastated, but strangely, all I felt was clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It hadn't spiraled out of nowhere. No, this had been planned, orchestrated. From the moment Mom called me last week to bring dessert, this had been set up. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Mora?" It was Skylar. I didn't answer. "I didn't know they'd go that far," she said, her voice wobbling. "We just thought maybe if you heard it all together from the family." I turned the faucet on, loud enough to drown her out. After a minute, her footsteps faded. Coward. I washed my face, dried it slowly, then took a deep breath. I wasn't staying another minute. When I stepped back into the hallway, several family members were gathered near the top of the stairs. My mom, arms crossed. Aunt Rachel, whispering something to Uncle Jim. Skylar hovered behind them, chewing her lip like a guilty child. And at the center, blocking the stairs like some patriarchal bouncer, was my father. I walked toward him, my gaze even. "I'm leaving," I said. "No, you're not," he replied, his voice low. "You think you can walk out after what you just pulled?" "What I pulled?" I laughed once, short and sharp. "You set me up like I was a pawn on your board, and when I didn't play along, Mom threw water in my face." "You embarrassed your mother," he growled. "She embarrassed herself." "You're so wrapped up in your own ego you can't see what your sister's going through. She's pregnant, Mora. She needs help." "She needs boundaries," I snapped. "What she doesn't need is to steal a home I worked 10 years to earn." "You don't need that much space," he said, shaking his head. "You live alone." "That's because I earned the right to choose who's in my space." "You think you're better than the rest of us?" he asked, stepping forward. "No," I said quietly. "I think I'm just not for sale." Skylar whimpered behind him. "Stop, please." And then it happened. In one fluid, furious motion, my father shoved me, hard. His hand landed square on my shoulder, and the world tilted. I stumbled backward, heels slipping on the wood, and tumbled down the staircase. My elbow hit first, sharp pain flaring, then my hip, then wrist, then nothing but a thud as I landed awkwardly at the bottom. Silence swallowed the room. For a few seconds, all I could hear was my own breath, shaky and ragged. I looked up the stairs. No one moved. No one screamed, not even Skylar. They just stood there, frozen in the amber light, watching. I pulled myself upright with my uninjured hand, cradling my wrist. My elbow throbbed, and the side of my thigh burned from the impact. But what hurt more than anything, more than the fall, the betrayal, the insults, was the look on their faces. They weren't shocked, they weren't horrified. They were just waiting to see what I'd do next, as if pushing me down a flight of stairs was just another move in their playbook. I stood slowly, forcing every muscle to obey. "Don't touch me," I said when my mother finally took a step forward. "I wasn't," she started. "You were," I cut her off. "You all were." I limped to the coat rack, grabbed my bag with shaking fingers, and turned toward the door. No one reached for me. Not one person apologized. Not one voice called my name. I drove home in silence. Every bump in the road sent lightning through my elbow. My wrist was swelling, and I knew I'd need ice, maybe even a splint. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even swear. I just kept thinking. They wanted the apartment so badly, they were willing to hurt me for it. Back in my apartment, I peeled off my wet clothes, swapped them for sweats, and pressed a bag of frozen peas to my arm. The swelling had already started to color, deep blue spreading like ink under my skin. I walked to the mirror in my bathroom, the one I installed myself last fall. The one with the soft, adjustable light and matte black frame I picked out on a random Sunday after finally paying off the last of my credit card debt. My reflection stared back, bruised, tired, but not broken. Not anymore. I wasn't going back there. Not for an apology. Not for closure. And sure as hell not for another ambush. I finally understood. The people who hurt you the most will often share your last name. After rinsing off the dried sweat and shame, I sat on the edge of my bed with my wrist in a bandage and my thoughts moving far too fast. The apartment was quiet, but not in a lonely way, more like the kind of stillness that lets truth echo louder. I had left the bathroom light on. Its soft glow bled out into the hallway, casting long shadows on the half-painted walls and unopened boxes I still hadn't dealt with. My elbow throbbed with every breath, and my wrist pulsed under the tight wrap. A dull ache crept into my shoulders, but I didn't reach for more painkillers. Not yet. Instead, I stared at the open can of gray paint I'd chosen myself, sitting in the corner of the living room floor. Next to it, a roller tray I hadn't cleaned properly. On the kitchen counter, a screwdriver from the night I replaced the cabinet handles. The bookshelf I assembled, crooked but standing. These weren't just home projects. They were markers of my effort. Every brushstroke and screw was a receipt of ownership. This apartment was mine. No one had given it to me. No one had gifted me the down payment. I didn't marry into it, didn't win it in a divorce, didn't inherit it out of pity. I earned every inch. The silence let my memories in, like the time I was 22 and fresh out of college. I had just started my first real job, entry-level marketing assistant, laughably underpaid, and had to back out of a weekend visit. Mom called sobbing, said she thought she was having heart palpitations. I rushed home terrified, only to find her perfectly fine, watching Jeopardy with a bag of popcorn. When I asked about her health, she laughed and said, "Well, stress is real, you know. Seeing my daughters helps." Or when Aunt Melissa, Mom's older sister, gave up her share of our grandmother's lake house. That place had been in the family for decades. But during a so-called family emergency, Mom told us Aunt Melissa was struggling financially and offered to relieve her of the burden. Months later, the house was sold. Melissa hasn't joined a family event since. Then there was the money. God, the money. 5 years ago, I got a call from a man named Curtis. He didn't introduce himself at first, just said my father was in trouble and someone needed to step in. Turned out, my dad had racked up $18,000 in poker debt. The lender wanted it paid or things would get complicated. I transferred the money within 48 hours. I never told a soul. Dad didn't bring it up either. Not a word of thanks. The only acknowledgement I ever got was a beer shoved into my hand at a Labor Day cookout. "You're a good kid," he'd said. That was it. I leaned back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. All of those moments. I'd brushed them aside, told myself I was overreacting. That family was messy, sure, but not malicious. That Mom's tears were real. That Dad's silence was just pride. That Skylar was overwhelmed. But no, these weren't isolated events. They were signs, patterns, proof. And I'd been blind to all of it. I reached for my phone, scrolled up to old messages from Mom. Every emoji-filled apology was followed by a guilt trip. "You know your sister really needs us right now." Or, It just hurts to be pushed aside by your own child. I stared at one in particular from last year. I guess we'll just cancel the holiday if it doesn't work for your schedule. No context, no regard. Emotional blackmail, plain and simple. I dropped the phone onto my lap and exhaled, deep and shaky. Enough. I pulled my notebook from the drawer and started listing things. Not a gratitude list, a record. Every holiday I funded, every favor I granted, every yes that cost me something. Pages filled quickly, and with each item, a heaviness lifted, replaced by something sharper, cleaner. Not hate, not yet, but recognition. Of truth. Of boundaries broken. I wasn't the cold one. I was the used one. I got up and grabbed my laptop from the kitchen counter. The battery was nearly dead, so I plugged it in and opened a browser. The first words I typed into the search bar were, Real Estate Attorney Eugene, Oregon. The top result was Quentin Lyle Esquire. 40 years of experience, property litigation, reputation for being tactful but fearless. His headshot showed a clean-shaven man in a navy suit with eyes that said, I don't blink. I saved the contact info and stared at it. I didn't call him, not yet, because even now, part of me still hesitated. What kind of daughter lawyers up against her own parents? But what kind of parents push their daughter down the stairs? No, they drew the line. I was just standing on the other side now. I shut the laptop slowly, wincing as I adjusted my wrist. My body was bruised, but the fog in my mind had cleared. The years I spent trying to win their approval, the favors, the silence, the self-erasure, all of it, gone. I had spent a lifetime earning their approval. Maybe it was time to earn back my self-respect. The morning started with a vibration. One ping, then another, and another. At first, I assumed it was just a string of work emails or some group chat I'd forgotten to mute. But as I squinted at my phone through sleep-heavy eyes, the notification bar blurred into a single flood of red dots. Facebook mentions, text messages, voicemails, Instagram DMs, even a missed call from someone I hadn't talked to in 3 years. Something was wrong. I opened Facebook first. It was the kind of mistake you only make once. My mother had posted a smiling photo of Skylar cradling her belly with a caption that made my stomach turn. It breaks my heart when family turns their back on love. Our sweet Skylar, pregnant, hopeful, and now betrayed. Some people care more about property than people. Please pray for our family. There were already over 70 comments. Neighbors, church friends, distant cousins I barely remembered. She's always been cold. I knew something was off with that girl. How can you let your pregnant sister suffer like this? Not a single person asked for my side. They didn't need it. The narrative had already been written, published, and sold. I dropped the phone onto the comforter and stared at the ceiling, bile rising in my throat. Just yesterday, I'd been trying to bandage my wrist. Now I had to figure out how to bandage my name. I forced myself out of bed, ignoring the sharp pulse in my arm. I needed air. I made coffee, black, strong enough to burn. As I took the first sip, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Skylar. Please don't be mad. I didn't mean for it to go this far. My thumb hovered over the screen. She had the nerve. I scrolled down and found the link she had forgotten to remove. It led to an anonymous TikTok account. The caption read, When your own sister says this to a pregnant woman. The video wasn't a video. It was a clip of audio, my voice clear and cold. This apartment is mine. You're not entitled to anything I earned. That's all. No context, no background, no mention of staircases or screams or hospital-grade ice packs. Just my voice, chopped and served on a silver platter. The comments were even worse than the Facebook ones. Yikes, she's heartless. Hope she likes living alone forever. That baby deserves better. I wanted to scream, not because of what they were saying, but because Skylar had recorded me. That conversation, 2 days ago, had been in my living room. She'd shown up with puffy eyes and soft apologies. Said she wanted to talk woman to woman. Said she didn't want to lose her sister. She recorded the whole thing. That wasn't just betrayal. That was warfare. By noon, the ripple had reached my workplace. My manager, Jason, called me into a conference room with frosted glass walls and the kind of lighting that made you feel like you were under examination. I just wanted to check in, he said carefully. HR got a few messages from people outside the company about some social media stuff. I know, I said. It's my family. Right. He rubbed his chin. Just wanted to make sure you're okay, and to say, maybe avoid engaging online, at least until this settles. Settles? I walked out back to my desk and felt eyes trail me. One coworker offered a polite nod. 2 others pretended to be busy until I passed. In the break room, I heard someone whisper, "She kicked her pregnant sister out. That's messed up." I didn't confront them. I just took out my notebook and started writing names, timestamps, notes. I wasn't going to fight back with another post or some overly filtered selfie with a caption about inner peace. I was going to prepare. That night after dinner, chicken and spinach because pain doesn't pause hunger, I sat back down at my kitchen counter, opened my laptop again, and dialed the number I'd saved. "Quentin Lyle's office," a woman answered. "I'd like to schedule a consultation," I said, "regarding a jointly owned home and a lot of family drama." We scheduled the meeting for Monday morning. Then I printed screenshots of the Facebook post. I saved every comment, every share. I copied the TikTok video link, even though it made my blood boil. I called my building's front desk and asked about security footage access, politely, firmly, like someone with nothing to hide. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about control. They wanted a villain, someone to blame, someone to hurl shame at like a stone wall and wait for it to crack. But what they didn't realize was that shame had stopped working on me. I closed my laptop, stood in front of the window, and looked out at the street below. The world kept turning. Cars passed, dogs barked. Somewhere, someone was posting a photo of their dinner while my name was being dragged. Let them. If they wanted to turn me into the villain, they'd soon regret giving me a reason to play the part. By Monday morning, I was no longer shaking. I'd swapped out my weekend sweats for slacks and a navy blouse. Something about dressing like a lawyer's client made me feel like I belonged at that table. I parked outside the 2-story brick office building with 10 minutes to spare. Inside, the air smelled like lemon polish and quiet decisions. No shouting, no judgment, just contracts and consequences. Quentin Lyle's assistant greeted me with practiced politeness. Within minutes, I was seated in a leather chair across from a man whose gaze made it clear. This wasn't his first family implosion. He didn't waste time on small talk. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. I gave him the will from my grandmother, the notarized inheritance documentation, screenshots of the Facebook smear, a transcript of the TikTok clip, and a written timeline of every encounter since the so-called family meeting. I laid it all on the table. Every manipulation, every bruise, every silence I'd swallowed for 30 years. When I finally stopped, he sat back, crossed his fingers, and said, "You're not crazy. You're just the first one in your family to say no." That one sentence hit harder than anything I'd heard in weeks. He nodded toward the documents. "Let's draft your formal intent to sell. Once Skylar receives this, she'll either have to buy you out or agree to list the property." I signed the papers with steady hands. That night, back in my apartment, the adrenaline had cooled, but not the clarity. My phone buzzed just past 8 p.m. A name popped up I hadn't expected. Aunt Margot. "I heard what happened. Call me if you want truth, not guilt." I stared at the message for a long minute before tapping call. Margot answered on the second ring. Her voice was low but not frail, steady, real. "I was like you once," she said. "Your mother made me feel like saying no was betrayal." She told me about the lake house, how my mom cornered her during a health scare in the 90s, made her sign over her half of the family property for the good of everyone. It was the same playbook. Emotional leverage, manufactured emergencies, guilt as currency. "She's always been good at that," Margot said. "Skylar learned from the best." I said nothing. I didn't need to. "You're not the first one they tried to break," she added. "But you're the first one who didn't crack." When we hung up, I felt something shift inside me. Not pain, not rage, just confirmation. The next morning, Quentin emailed the finalized legal notice. I paid for certified delivery. That envelope, thick and official, was heading straight to Skylar and my parents. It wasn't a threat. It was a boundary dressed in legalese. I started a folder, Family Legal, labeled it with a black Sharpie, and filed every piece of evidence behind it. Printouts, photos, mail receipts, even a list of witnesses who had seen me bruised. Then I deleted Facebook, blocked a few numbers. I wasn't running, I was fortifying. The silence from my parents had grown louder. No angry texts, no crocodile tears. Just quiet, calculated. But I'd seen this pattern before. Silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. And this time I had my own. They wanted me to surrender quietly. But now I was making noise, and legal paper speaks louder than tears. Saturday morning arrived, wrapped in a quiet I didn't trust. The sunlight poured through my kitchen window, glinting off the stainless steel faucet as I stirred oat milk into my coffee. For a brief moment, the world was still, normal. I took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and reached for the mug with both hands, my left wrist still sore, but healing. Then came the knock. No, pounding, angry, urgent. My phone buzzed simultaneously. Dad, we need to talk. Open up. I froze, walked slowly to the door, peeked through the peephole. They were all there. Dad stood front and center, red-faced. Mom beside him, clutching her handbag like a weapon. Skylar behind them, visibly upset, one hand on her belly, the other clutching Dorian's arm like a leash. I didn't open the door. Instead, I slid my phone onto the narrow entryway table and tapped record. Screen down, mic facing out. My heart pounded, but my voice, if I spoke, would have been calm, because I was done performing panic for people who never noticed the real thing. We raised you better than this, Dad barked. You ungrateful child, Mom shouted louder. Skylar's voice cracked. How could you do this to your own sister? I'm pregnant, Mora! I leaned back against the hallway wall, arms folded. Let them yell. Let them throw their guilt like darts. She's heartless, Mom cried. Absolutely heartless. You think money makes you better than family now? Dad again. I didn't respond. I didn't give them the satisfaction. Open this door, Mora. Or what? I whispered under my breath. 15 minutes passed. Maybe 20. Their voices eventually died out. I waited 5 more, heart thumping in my throat, before stepping toward the peephole again. The hallway was quiet, empty. I unlocked the door but kept the chain fastened, just enough to peek through. And then came the scream, a loud thud, followed by Mom's voice shrieking, She shoved me! I fell! What? I slammed the door shut. Dorian was yelling, Got it on video! She pushed her! We're pressing charges! Skylar was crying again, or pretending. It was hard to tell anymore. I backed up, snatched my phone off the table, and dialed Quentin Lyle's number immediately. His voicemail picked up. This is Mora Evers, I said, my voice low but clear. They're here. They staged something. I didn't touch anyone, but they're trying to set me up. I have audio. Please call me back. By evening, I was still shaken but not broken. Not this time. I hadn't left my apartment since the confrontation. I'd shut the blinds, brewed tea I didn't drink, and sat on the couch with my laptop, watching the footage from my doorbell camera again and again. The angle wasn't perfect, but the timing matched. The moment I cracked the door open, Mom threw herself sideways. Not a stumble, an act, a performance, an ugly, desperate attempt at narrative control. Then came the cherry on top, a knock at the door, this time a courier. A certified letter from Skylar's attorney. Subject: emotional distress and prenatal risk. Alleging that I'd triggered psychological trauma leading to potential complications in pregnancy. That my intentional emotional abuse was putting both mother and unborn child in danger. They had the gall to weaponize her pregnancy now. I scanned it all, calmly, then forwarded it to Quentin with one line. Need to respond. I have evidence. The next morning, a flash drive containing the full recording was in an envelope. Along with it, I added Quentin's business card and a sticky note that read, You want legal? Let's talk legal. I dropped it in the mail myself. If they thought silence was scary, wait until they saw me loud. They wanted war. They just declared it on the wrong woman. By the time Monday came, my nerves were made of glass, clear, sharp, unbreakable. I arrived at Quentin's office in a tailored navy blazer I hadn't worn since a work gala 2 years ago. He met me at the door with a nod, then led me into the conference room. Everything smelled like printer toner and leather chairs. This wasn't home. This was battle prep. Skylar and our parents were already there. Skylar had curled her hair, wore soft pink, and clutched her belly like it was a shield. Mom was in pearls and silence. Dad kept tapping his pen on a yellow legal pad like a ticking bomb. Their attorney, a man who looked like he hadn't smiled since the Clinton administration, cleared his throat when we sat. This mediation is intended to resolve the dispute over the shared property in a civil, private manner, he began, fake calm oozing through his tone. Their side opened with sweeping claims: emotional distress, family betrayal, timing concerns given Skylar's condition. Skylar sniffled on cue. I said nothing. Quentin adjusted his tie, then opened the folder we'd prepared. We'd like to enter several exhibits into the record, he said evenly, including video, audio, and correspondence. All time-stamped, authenticated. He slid a USB across the table. The opposing lawyer hesitated, eyes narrowing. What's this? Proof, Quentin replied. He clicked play on a short clip. Just 1 minute. My parents yelling outside my apartment. My mom calling me a spoiled monster. Skylar accusing me of endangering her unborn child. My father demanding I hand over the damn house. Then, another recording. Mom's voice, clear and cold, saying to Skylar, "Make sure you sound scared. Nobody believes the calm ones." Silence filled the room. I looked across the table. Skylar's eyes widened. Then she looked down. Mom's jaw locked tight. Dad's tapping stopped. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I sat still and let the weight of the truth settle. Quentin leaned forward. Would you like to continue with emotional distress claims? Their lawyer asked for a recess, but the truth wasn't done speaking. As we returned from the break, Quentin brought out a laptop and started a Zoom call. Mr. Bill Nestor has joined us. He's a resident in Mora's building. Bill, my elderly neighbor, appeared on screen, wearing a sweater with a cat on it and adjusting his glasses. I saw them show up at her door, he said simply. Heard the yelling, saw her mom throw herself down after Mora shut the door. She never touched anyone. Are you certain? Their lawyer asked. Bill didn't flinch. I may be 76, son, but I know a fake faint when I see one. No one responded. When it ended, I stood and said, I want the sale handled legally, and I want no further contact. If that's not respected, we pursue criminal charges for attempted fraud. Skylar looked like she was about to cry again, but didn't. They agreed to review terms privately. Later that evening, as I was heating leftovers, I got a text from my coworker Janine. You need to see this. Viral. 40K views in an hour. I opened TikTok. A creator I'd never met was breaking down my family's Facebook posts, comparing timelines, voice tones, and caption changes. She'd found contradictions, pointed out the inconsistencies in my mom's broken-hearted tone versus her aggressive text to me that I'd publicly posted 2 days ago. One comment read, "This feels like emotional extortion disguised as motherhood." Another, "I don't know Mora, but I'd hire her as my crisis manager in a heartbeat." I watched it twice. They'd tried to destroy me publicly, and now, the public was watching them instead. It was no longer just a family feud. It was a reckoning, and the world had started watching. Tuesday morning, the call came in just after 9 a.m. I had just sat down with a cup of tea when Quentin's name popped up on the screen. They've agreed to settle, he said simply. The house will be sold. You'll receive your portion. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. After we hung up, I stared at the steam curling from my cup. No legal war, no courtroom spectacle, just the quiet click of a deal made under pressure. The same way they always operated. Once control slipped from their hands, they folded. Later that day, I found a thread on the local neighborhood forum. The family who used to live next to my cousin? Drama. Heard they tried to scam their own daughter out of her place. Glad she stood up to them. For the first time, my name wasn't the one attached to whispered blame. Their social circle had shrunk to silence. No defense, no outreach, just absence. Meanwhile, the world kept clicking. 2 days after the mediation, I got a text from my cousin. Julie, of all people. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Thought you should know. Skylar's medical records leaked. People are talking. I didn't reply, but I checked Twitter. Skylar's name was trending, not for baby shower registries or heartfelt pregnancy posts, but because someone had anonymously posted documents revealing she'd had a termination less than a year prior. The narrative of sacred motherhood shattered like stained glass. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't share it. But I watched. Dorian tried pushing back in comments. That's private. She's being bullied. Think before you post. But no one cared anymore. People who build castles out of lies can't complain when the tide comes. By Thursday, I was sitting across from my department director in her glass-walled office downtown. We've been watching how you've handled everything, she said. Composure, boundaries, integrity. I blinked. She continued. We'd like to offer you a new role, client recovery lead. You'll be the one guiding others through high-conflict situations. Pay bump, of course, more visibility. For a moment, I was too surprised to answer. Then I smiled and nodded. Yes, I'd like that very much. When I stepped outside afterward, the city looked sharper, more in focus. Not gentler, but more honest. I returned home and sat on my balcony as the sun dipped low behind the neighboring rooftops. My glass of wine balanced on the railing, untouched. Then I picked up my phone and typed the final message I'd ever sent to them. I'm done. Please don't contact me anymore. I didn't hit send with anger. There was no rage left, just resolve. Block, block, block. Then I opened a new email, changed the address, something clean, untethered. The last thing I did was sit back in my chair and exhale, deep and full. I gave them years, I whispered into the fading light. I'm giving myself the rest of my life. The apartment was quiet, but for once, it didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. They wanted me to burn for them, but I walked through the fire, and now I'm finally free. 6 months passed like a gentle tide, rolling in without ceremony. By now, the apartment looked nothing like it did when I first moved in. Boxes gone, walls painted a soft sage green, sunlight pooling on refinished hardwood floors. It smelled like lemon balm and sandalwood. Every morning, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and a book in hand. Sometimes fiction, sometimes nothing more than the back of the box it came in. I had the time now. Not because life slowed down, but because I stopped racing toward approval that was never mine to begin with. In the distance, I could hear construction. New condos rising in the next block, scaffolding clanging like a reminder. Something's always being built, even when something else falls apart. Skylar had the baby. A girl, I heard through a mutual acquaintance. No one called me. No photo, no invitation, not even a group text from a distant cousin. The silence didn't hurt the way it used to. One Thursday afternoon, Julie, the cousin who first warned me about Skylar's leaked records, sent another message. FYI, your parents moved in with Skylar. People are saying it's bad. Dorian lost his job. They're behind on their bills. No one's really visiting anymore. I read it twice. No gloating, no satisfaction, just the echo of choices, catching up. Some truths don't need to be spoken aloud. They show themselves in who stays and who stops knocking. Later that night, I found an old shoebox in the closet. Inside were photos. Christmas mornings, 4th of July BBQs, church picnics. I flipped through them slowly. Some faces I didn't even recognize anymore. Just ghosts in polyester. One picture stopped me. Me and Grandma on the dock at her lake house, my small hand in hers. She knew what fairness looked like. That's why she split the house evenly. Because she saw us for who we really were, beyond the favoritism, beyond the facades. I placed that photo aside. Then I wrote on a sticky note, carefully, slowly, like it was a truth I'd needed to hear years ago. It wasn't my job to fix the family. It was theirs not to break me. I lit a candle, dropped the rest of the photos in a metal bowl, and watched them curl and disappear. No rage, just release. The next morning, I met Amelia, someone from work, for coffee. Not a date, not anything complicated, just two people sharing a table, trading stories that didn't revolve around trauma. We laughed about a coworker who always brought fish to the office microwave. No one asked about Skylar, or my parents, or the firestorm from months ago, and I didn't bring it up. On the way home, I stopped at a small bookstore tucked between a bakery and a laundromat. I bought a journal, nothing fancy, just navy blue with thick cream pages. When I got home, I brewed tea, curled up in the chair by the window, and opened it. On the first page, I wrote, "This time, the story starts with me." And that was enough. The phone didn't buzz anymore. The door stayed closed. I didn't scroll for their names. I didn't replay the moments. I just let life move. There were days I still felt that old ache, the one that asks why they couldn't just love me like I loved them. But I didn't answer it anymore. It could ask all it wanted. I had nothing left to give it. Peace didn't look like winning. It looked like waking up without dread, like cooking pasta on a Tuesday just because I felt like it, like calling friends and laughing without glancing at the clock, like knowing I would never again have to explain myself to people who only ever saw me as a resource. They taught me how to survive their chaos, but I taught myself how to live without it. Before I turn the page and close this chapter, I want to leave you with something I wish someone had told me years ago, something that might have saved me a lot of confusion, heartache, and silence. You don't owe anyone your silence. Not your parents, not your relatives, not your partner, not anyone. Especially when that silence is costing you your dignity, your peace, or your sense of self. Staying quiet to keep the peace is not the same as being at peace. Yes, families can be a source of deep love and belonging, but they can also be places of pain, guilt, and unspoken rules that keep us trapped. And no, love should never be measured by how much pain you're willing to endure to keep the family together. Real love shows up in respect, in safety, in peace, not in how much you can tolerate without breaking. If you've ever been made to feel guilty for setting a boundary, if you've ever been called selfish for choosing your mental health over their comfort, if you've ever had to walk away to save yourself, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not cruel for protecting your peace. You are not ungrateful for recognizing abuse. You are not weak for walking away. In fact, sometimes walking away from those who were supposed to love and protect you, especially when they didn't, is the strongest, most courageous thing you can do. It's not a betrayal of them. It's a commitment to yourself. And if you're still out there, trying to earn the love that should have been given to you freely, trying to prove your worth to people who should have seen it from the start, I see you. Truly. I know how exhausting that is. But more importantly, I hope you start seeing yourself, seeing that you are already enough, already worthy, already whole. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you thought you couldn't live without, just to finally breathe again? Do you believe loyalty should have limits, even with family? Or do you think family loyalty should be unconditional, no matter the cost? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know your story. And if this message touched something in you, comment 1, or tell me where in the world you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. If it didn't resonate with you, that's okay too. Tell me why, and where you're tuning in from. I welcome all voices here. If you want more content like this, raw, honest, human, stories that speak to the heart, and sometimes say the things we were never allowed to say out loud, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep these conversations going and these truths alive. Until next time, take care of your heart. You deserve that much.